Your daily dose of sports talk is here. Highlights, interviews, and analysis. From the entertainment capital of the world, SportsWrap with Jason Page starts now.
Welcome to this Monday edition of the show. We got a lot to do over the next 60 minutes. What a wild weekend. We could just use a couple of days just to get through the weekend. And we will, in some ways, actually do that. Tons of NFL over the next couple of days. Monday night game to preview later on in the show in odds and ends. There's even Baseball Hall of Fame news. We'll get to that in odds and ends. And as I said, we'll get into the NFL talk. Nick Ferguson drops by in 10 minutes. Talk about the college football. Also get some NFL thoughts with the former Broncos safety and Denver sports media personality. But as always, on SportsWrap, we start things with the big story. And the big story takes us to college football. And look, did you think we'd start anywhere else on this Monday edition of the show? Quick note. I have a column that is live over on MS Now, formerly MSNBC. A column that's live over at msnow.com. Go and check it out for my thoughts on this college football playoff, mostly as it relates to Notre Dame, which I'll get into here. But a great column that we put up earlier today. If you get a chance, go check it out. You can decide if it's great. It's not for me to decide if it's great. It's good for you to decide whether or not it's great. Go and check that out. Look, this has all been building up over the last several weeks, and that is part of the problem for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. This group of people that get into a room, no cameras, nothing leaks out. We have no idea what happens other than what, Reese Davis gets out of the committee chairperson or the director of the committee. That's all you get every week, or the few questions that they answer. But part of the problem with all of this, and I've talked about it on the show before, is this idea of having 4 weeks of brackets and polls, or rankings in this case, that come out from this selection committee. Cut all that crap out. If you don't want the grief that we got from fans and pundits alike on Sunday, cut all the crap out of the middle. Cut all the fat off of this. And just say, the day after the season ends, that on December 7th, we're going to get into a room, and at 6 p.m. Eastern on December 7th, just like Selection Sunday for NCAA men's basketball and then women's basketball, we're going to release our rankings. Because if you do that, a lot of this angst with Notre Dame goes away. A lot of the fallout that's coming from this goes away if you simply make a determination that we're going to make an announcement the day after the college football season ends. And that means conference championships and all of that. That said, 2 things can be true here. One thing that can be true is that Notre Dame should have been, and I think like minds can disagree on this, by the way. Like minds can disagree whether or not Notre Dame belonged in versus Alabama versus Miami. Forget the James Madison and Tulane stuff, because they were pretty much assured spots, especially when you have an 8-win Duke team that wins the ACC conference tournament. But ultimately, what this boils down to isn't Notre Dame and Miami. It was Notre Dame and Alabama because of the way Alabama lost in the SEC title game. If you want to have an argument as Notre Dame, that's your argument. It's not Miami. Because you lose the argument with Miami. The Hurricanes belonged more so than Notre Dame. I don't think Notre Dame should have been kept out, but they shouldn't have been put in at the expense of Miami. They should have been put in at the expense of Alabama. And I am so sick and tired of hearing the people in the media that just love to perform verbal fellatio on the SEC, and in this case Alabama, and say, well, you can't punish them for being in a SEC championship game and losing the way they did. It's not just about that game. It's 3 losses on the season. It isn't as if the only loss they had was to Georgia at the Georgia Dome, or whatever the hell they call it these days, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium or whatever it is in Atlanta. That's not the only loss. You had one of the worst losses of the season against Florida State. Yes, you had one of the best wins of the season at Georgia in Athens. But you can't have it both ways. You have to examine the entire resume. And a 3-loss Alabama team did not belong in this playoff over Notre Dame, especially given the way both teams were playing going into this playoff. That's one. Cast that aside. This is a bad look for Notre Dame. This is a bad look for a school that likes to try and elevate itself above the rest. We are above the fray. We are better than the rest. We don't have to have a conference. One, go get yourself into a conference. It'll help. They're never going to do that, though. They don't want to have to share the money. Two, outside of going and getting yourself a conference, if you're Notre Dame, you cannot back out of this bowl game, say we're taking our ball and we're going home, because you had 2 different years in the last 8 years. 2018, I believe, and 2023. Might have been 2021 and 23. My years are a little fuzzy. I wrote about it in the column. You had 2 years as Notre Dame where you got dusted in the BCS or the college football playoff semifinals. You got destroyed by Clemson one year. And then you got destroyed by Alabama another. In years where people didn't think, and the punditry and people in the media didn't think you belonged in the college football playoff. And you got opportunities at the expense of other teams, and you got your doors blown off. And guess what the teams didn't do that didn't get in that year? They didn't say, we're taking our ball, we're going home, we're not playing in a bowl game. They played in those bowl games. So Notre Dame, suck it up, play in the Pop-Tart Bowl against BYU. You're not going to do that? I think it's a stain on your legacy as an athletic program. I really do. And I say that as somebody who actually likes Notre Dame athletics. I'm not a diehard, but as somebody who didn't have a team to root for growing up, I actually liked them. I think some of the shine comes off Notre Dame with this. I'm sorry, it just does. I think it's selfish, and it could have lasting ramifications on what happens to the bowl season as we know it. Nick Ferguson talks college football next. Welcome back to the show. You've heard what I had to say about the college football playoff in the big story. And again, a reminder, msnow.com for my column on the Notre Dame side of this college football playoff story. Sam Yarnell later in the show on the NFL, but now we say hello to our friend, the great Nick Ferguson, former NFL safety, Denver sports media personality. And he's a Heisman voter who joins us on the show. And I'm not going to ask him who he voted for because he won't tell me. Because he's not allowed to. Didn't you tell me one time you're not allowed to tell who you voted for?
You are absolutely right. And I don't even tell my wife. So if I don't tell my wife, wow, you know I'm not telling anyone else.
Fair enough. I've tried to wrangle it out of him, and he's never going to tell. So I've already given up hope on that. So I am anxious to hear your perspective. I've heard, a lot of people's perspective on this. As somebody who's in touch with the collegiate game, obviously a Heisman voter, we've all watched the evolution of the college football playoff leading up to what we saw on Sunday with Notre. And look, to me, I'll just be real brief because I already said what I had to say. But my take on it is this: stop the charade of this weekly show on ESPN that leads up to it, because it's all just a show, because by the time you got to the final one, Notre Dame, which was in the whole time, is out. Just stop with it. Just do what the NCAA men's basketball selection committee does. Last day of the football season, after all the college conference championships are done, get into a room, decide who gets in. I think there'd be a lot less flack for this committee if they had done it that way, as opposed to the buildup over the last few weeks, Nick, where you had Notre Dame in, and then all of a sudden Notre Dame is out.
Yeah, I would totally agree, but I'm sorry to tell you, JP, be the bearer of bad news, but that's not going to happen, my friend. You know why? It's because there's too much money involved in this entire process, and that's the whole thing. We want to make sure we rev it up. We want to lather people up and get the back and forth, because it feeds a lot of the shows on the four-letter network to debate back and forth as we get to this particular point, because I'm like you. I don't understand it. Why are we doing it every single week as we get to the back half of the season, when we could do just what you said basketball does? Just after those championship games, then get into a room and then have that debate, because I understand why Notre Dame fans are upset, because the committee was talking about Notre Dame this entire time being one of the better teams in the playoff race. But then when it came to the rubber meeting the road, they find themselves on the outs. Now, I am not going to absolve Notre Dame for things that they have done, because they are not technically associated with any conference.
No.
Right? Now, they're associated with the ACC and everything else but football. So what they're experiencing is a byproduct of their own doing. Why? Because of ding, 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 money. Right? They racked up tons of money in television deals, last season, and they continue to do that, but you're not associated with the conference. If they want to change this, and they being Notre Dame, you need to get into a conference, because you can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because now you find both feet out when it comes to this year's college football playoffs.
Yeah, Nick, and I said it too. I mean, there's been years in the, when it was, I believe, 4 teams, might have been 2018 and 2023 or 2021 and 2023, where Notre Dame gets in, gets dusted by Clemson, gets dusted by Alabama. And in those years, there were people saying, wait a minute, why is Notre Dame even in the college football playoff? They were in because they were Notre Dame, and they got their doors blown off. And you know what? The teams that didn't get in when Notre Dame was getting in, you know what they didn't do? They didn't take their ball and go home. And look, I'm adamant in the fact that Notre Dame should be in. But at the same time, I have a big problem with what they've done here in this whole idea of, well, we're not going to go play a bowl game because of this. Because I think it starts the slippery slope of potentially bowl season really not meaning anything, and more teams deciding to do this potentially. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And the sour grapes from the Notre Dame faithful. And I thought Notre Dame, they were better than this, right? You're supposed to stand up. You got touchdown Jesus and all of that. But no, I don't get my way, right? So since I don't get my way, I'm taking my ball, and my cones and everything else, and I'm going home. That's not what you're supposed to do. This is supposed to be an opportunity for you to say, you know what? All right, committee, we're going to play who are we going to play in the bowl game, and we're going to take it out on them. We're going to show that we were supposed to be that team to be in instead of an Alabama or University of Miami. But you still can't really holler at that one, because you did lose in a head-to-head to the University of Miami, but you're not in a freaking conference.
In the name of inclusivity, with what college football has tried to do with the James Madison and Tulane being in, though, have they done it to the detriment of this playoff with 2 teams that are likely going to get their doors blown off in the first round game? One's a 20-point underdog, and others a 16-point underdog. Have they done a disservice to this playoff?
Yes, they have. And here is what it is. And I saw this from the beginning of the season as I argued back and forth with my friend who was a huge Miami Hurricanes fan. And I tried to tell him, this isn't about doing the right thing. This is always and will always be about money. So you're going to see Tulane and James Madison get their doors blown off. And other teams are going to protest. Notre Dame is going to come around and protest again. So now we already at 12. So you know what that means? They're going to push it to 16. And then we're going to get to 18. You know why? Because it's more money. It gives the four-letter network more to talk about. And they're trying to stretch this thing as much as they can. They're adding flour, water, whatever they can to stretch this thing out. But once again, you're not only stretching it out, you're putting stress on these players, right? These players, some of which have ambitions to play on the next level. And then we've seen in years past where some guys have opted not to play in their bowl game because they were focusing on their futures as far as NFL, because there was a guy by the, I think his name was Jake Butts, played tight end for the Michigan Wolverines, played in a bowl game, got injured, right? And it hurt his time with the Denver Broncos. And then guess what? He continued to get hurt for the Denver Broncos with that same knee injury. So this is a conundrum that they have now created. They thought they had a solution getting away from the old BCS, but it just seemed like there's a whole bunch of crackpots going on right now.
I think as long as you have a bunch of people getting into a room behind closed doors and deciding this stuff, the subjectivity of it all, it's always going to be a problem as opposed to just hard and fast rules. This place, this position gets a spot in the postseason. Well, more with Nick Ferguson. We'll get into the NFL with him. Interested to get his thoughts on a couple of the big stories of the day. Coming back. All right, from our Las Vegas studios, Sports Wrap continues on a Monday. Sam Yarnell will be here in 10 minutes to talk some NFL. See what he has to say about a couple of AFC and NFC teams that we're going to get into. Don't forget, we have Tuesday leftovers tomorrow. If we don't get to your team and your story today, don't worry, we'll get to it tomorrow. So as Week 14 gets set to wrap up with a Monday night game tonight, Nick Ferguson, I'm curious as to your perspective on whether or not these playoffs, and we'll get into a couple of teams, but are these playoffs still as wide open? 4 or 5 weeks ago, it just felt like anybody could win if you got into the second season, as Bill Parcells liked to call it. Does it still feel that way to you, that anybody who gets into these playoffs could wind up winning the Super Bowl?
You know what? No, I'm not going to say that, because some teams have started to separate themselves, and the way you separate yourself is by playing complementary football. There's only a handful of teams that we can look at and say, well, these are complete teams from top to bottom. And one of those teams didn't play last week, and that's the New England Patriots. Now, obviously, living in Denver, that's blasphemy, right? You cannot say that, right? Because that's the team that's the Denver Broncos are chasing, but that's a well-coached team. Josh McDaniels is doing a great job, maybe not as a head coach, but he does a great job as an OC. And Drake May looks better, obviously, than he did last season. They are a really physical team. They play great on the edges as far as their corners are concerned. And they do one thing well that you need to in the playoffs is run the ball. Trevion Henderson has been a godsend for them and providing balance and a grinding out 4-minute or 2-minute offense, being able to run the ball. So that is the more complete team. But yes, you throw the Denver Broncos in there. Obviously, based on what we saw yesterday in the Duke 'em out game between the Buffalo Bills and Joe Burrow, I know the Cincinnati fans are like, gosh darn it, I wish Joe Burrow never got injured. But still, even if he didn't, your defense can't stop a nosebleed, so it wasn't going to change anything. But, a lot of teams are surging at the right time. And just think about the Baltimore Ravens, even though they lost, right? They were left for dead early in the season when Lamar Jackson actually got injured. So, I mean, on the back end, all those teams that are in the hunt, yeah, those teams, there's some really good teams that are going to fight for those last couple of spots. But as far as the top-tier teams, man, I think they're solid, and they've already kind of separated themselves.
We're going to talk a lot about Kansas City in the next segment and sort of the slow decline here that we've seen this season that leads us to a conclusion that, maybe they're going to have to make some big decisions in the offseason about how they move forward with this group of players. I want to ask you from the Houston side with what we saw last night, because to me, I keep saying it, that's the team nobody wants to see in the playoffs. To me, they're the most dangerous team because, we talk about the MacGyver defense that you always like to talk about with the Denver Broncos. To me, Houston's the best defense in the NFL, and that travels in the postseason. You could take that with you anywhere. In fact, if they play the Broncos in the playoffs, it'll be the first team to 13 that probably wins. So I'm curious to get your take on Houston, especially with C.J. Stroud. It feels like starting to figure it out, that I don't have to make the miracle play, that I just have to play smart football, disciplined football, control the game, let our defense do its thing. Where are you on the Texans right now?
I'm right there with you, because is that not the recipe for winning a championship? I know everyone has fallen in love with quarterbacks throwing for all these gaudy yards and just saying, okay, well, we have to be explosive. No, you don't, because there's one thing that reigns true and it never changes. Defense still wins championship. And if you have a great defense like the Houston Texans have, when you're talking about, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, man, those guys get after you on the edge. And CJ Stroud is just like, once again, it's just don't blow the game, right? Because when you look at their offense, you're not saying outside of Nico Collins, okay, well, who do they have at the wide receiver position that you got like, ooh, these guys are world beaters? You don't really have to. The idea is being consistent and efficient and having a balanced attack. Now, their only problem with the Houston Texans is that they don't have one of those grind them out run games. I mean, they got Nick Chubb, but they don't have one of those types of run games. But the only team, like I told you before, that has that type of run game is the New England Patriots. But the Patriots don't have edge pressure like the Houston Texans. So you're absolutely right. The Houston Texans are the team that no one wants to play because, once again, you got a healthy, CJ Stroud in your defense. Unlike the Broncos defense that can give you sacks, the Houston Texans can turn the ball over and give you more possessions.
Nick, you talk about teams separating themselves. I'm going to go with the Rams. I picked them before the season started, and there isn't anything that's dissuaded me from this idea that that's the team to beat right now.
Well, I mean, listen, offensively, they have the firepower, right? And they can run the ball with Blake Corum or Kyron Williams. They can do that because they got Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, right? Who I'm like, dude, these guys are great at what they do. But on their side, I mean, which defense, tell me, you would be more terrified to face? The Rams defense or the Texans or the Broncos defense? Which one?
Oh, I'd go with the Texans and Broncos.
Right, and so that's the only thing wrong with the Rams. That's why I said when we start to look at this, we're looking at complete teams, right? Teams that can do it on all three phases. And oh, by the way, with the Denver Broncos, they've shown with Marvin Mims, they can flip the field as far as punt return and kickoff returns. The only problem is that they never put Marvin Mims on the field as a wide receiver, which I believe is going to be a problem. But right now, we're talking about the Texans, we're talking about the Broncos, we're talking about the Rams, and we're talking about the New England Patriots. Those are close to complete teams as you can get, but some of those teams, like I said, have a little fall here and there.
Where do you put Seattle in this mix in the last minute?
Well, I definitely put Seattle in the mix because Seattle was a team coming into the season that I thought would win the NFC as a whole. Now, they have those capabilities, but sometimes they're so up and down that you don't know exactly what you're going to get. And I call that mystery meat that you put in aluminum foil and put it in the back of the refrigerator, and then 2 weeks later you come back and it's morphed into something else. That's the whole that's kind of the pro and the con of Seattle. They can morph into something great, and then they can morph into something that's an utter catastrophe. So, but it's going to come down to me, to those two teams, maybe the Rams and the Seattle Seahawks.
Nick Ferguson, former NFL safety, Denver sports media personality, Heisman voter. Don't ask him who he voted for. He ain't going to tell you. Loose lips sink ships, man.
That's right. They sink more than ships.
Always appreciate you, my friend. Have a great week. We'll talk soon.
See you later.
Coming back on this Monday Sports Wrap. Welcome back to the show. Coming up in 10 minutes, we'll get to the NFC side of the NFL Sunday. Let's focus our attention on the AFC. So weird to get to the NFL this late in the show, but college football playoff. I mean, we did some of it with Nick, but a lot of college football to get into in the show today. Has the clock struck midnight for the Kansas City Chiefs, Sam Yarnell? They are now a 16% favorite to make it into the playoffs if they win out. I won't say that is miracle territory, but it's pretty damn close. after a loss on Sunday night to the Texans in Kansas City. And look, every good run comes to an end, Sam Yarnell. I could do another big story on this and just sit here and talk, and you could just watch, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, look, to me, every good run comes to an end. And I see a parallel here between what we've seen over the last few years with the Golden State Warriors. And I think the Chiefs are about to enter that territory where they're going to have to make decisions on how to proceed with this group of players, and whether you try to cobble enough together around Patrick Mahomes, there's Stephen Curry, or are you going to start stripping it apart and, figuring out what that looks like here over the next couple of years? Are they at that point yet, Sam?
So first of all, the Chiefs are not even, you cannot compare them to the Golden State Warriors. They have not won nearly enough to compare them to one of the all-time greatest dynasties in the history of sports. The Chiefs haven't even won as much as the New England Patriots did less than 20 years ago. This isn't even the greatest dynasty of the millennium in football, right? This is very popular today, right? Everybody's talking about, oh, well, actually, it's been a great run for the Chiefs. Well, here's the thing. It wasn't supposed to end, and now everyone's just going to act like it's okay that it did. And, they had a great run, and they won a few AFC championships, and they went to a bunch in a row, and there are a couple of Lombardis sprinkled in there. They were the Super Bowl favorites coming into this year. They were the AFC favorites coming into this year. They were minus money to win their division coming into this season. This is a letdown beyond letdowns for the Kansas City Chiefs. And Jason, I'll say to the point about dynasties ending, in football at least, dynasties end because somebody leaves. Dynasties don't just end like they're seemingly ending for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a very unique circumstance going on in Kansas City right now. And quite frankly, it feels like it's a culmination of all the gambles that they took over the last 2, if not 3 seasons, finally coming around to bite them in their rear end.
I think the comparison to Golden State's actually very apt. The Warriors have 4 titles. The Chiefs have 3. You look at the MVPs and all of that stuff. I think the comparison is actually very appropriate. I think comparing it to the Patriots is unfair. I mean, we haven't seen, I don't know if we'll see anything like what the Patriots accomplished over the course of that dynasty, perhaps in our lifetime. But I don't look at it as negatively as you do. If this is where it ends, it's where it ends. In a league that's supposed to have all this parity in the NFL and the salary cap and all that stuff, I don't think it's such an awful thing if this is how it winds up ending. I think what they do next is what determines how ugly it gets for them over the next couple of years, like what's happened with the Warriors. I think if they try to think, well, maybe we can scrap another year out of Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce was awful in this game last night. Everybody was talking about, bounce back year for Travis Kelce. He was terrible in that game last night. You had guys dropping passes, and I know they can get on Patrick Mahomes, and we can talk about his 12 of 33 or whatever the hell it was. That game was, I'll say it again, that game's not on Patrick Mahomes. That game is on, I think, some of the decision-making late in the game, although I don't have a problem with what Andy Reid did. I probably would have done the same thing. It showed they were desperate in that moment, and I think they should have been. But I'm less, I don't know. I guess I'm less on the negatives of the whole thing than you are. Can we get to the Steelers, though? Because we crushed this team, and rightfully so, after the performance they had last week. To go into Baltimore and do what they did. And yes, the late call in that game sucks, and I get that Ravens fans are upset, and officiating's been a story throughout this year, throughout this entire season. That is a good bounce-back win for the Steelers. There's no other way to say it. Aaron Rodgers played like they need him to play if they are going to win that division. And by the way, they have a shot to win that division now. We wanted to crush them and say, hey, they might miss the playoffs altogether, but it feels like when you look at the way that division sets up, they are probably going to win the division because the Ravens are hot garbage.
Well, yeah, they got a lot of help elsewhere, too, to help win that division this weekend, too. Yeah, the story here, Jason, is what has Lamar Jackson been doing? His completion percentage over the last 6 weeks is in the 40s. This is horrible. From a two-time MVP winner, this is falling off a cliff-level performance from Lamar Jackson over the last 6 games. It's unacceptable for a guy who you're paying that much money. And it's unfortunate that John Harbaugh's job is probably going to come at the expense of Lamar Jackson playing horribly. That said, it is the Steelers and the Ravens, right? So when these teams meet in 3 weeks, I can all but guarantee you the Steelers will absolutely crap the bed and the Ravens will blow them out. That's just how this series works in the history, right? But look at the Steelers' schedule, man. It is a cakewalk to the finish line. If they don't win that division, I'll be very surprised.
I will be too. Everybody ready to run Mike Tomlin out of town, ourselves included, but found a way to get that team prepared. It's a good road win. We don't have enough time to talk about your Bills. Oh, we'll get to them tomorrow. I promise. Yeah, they beat the Bengals, but I'm off on the Bills now. I'm done. I was there. I was with Bills fans. I was with Bills Mafia. Not anymore. NFC next. We wrap it up with some odds and ends. 10 minutes from now. Monday Night Football game to preview. And a new member will be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame next year. Which is not the one I was hoping for. By the way, David Aardsma on the show tomorrow to talk about the Hall of Fame stuff, but also the baseball winter meetings, which are underway in Orlando, I believe. Sam Yarnell, Packers come up with a big win in Green Bay yesterday against the Bears. And look, you know, we like to get on Jordan Love, and we like to talk about the things he isn't and things he doesn't do. In a big spot yesterday, he played well, but I'm almost looking at this more from the Bears' perspective. Because, look, this is kind of what we saw yesterday is what the Packers are supposed to be. They're supposed to be a front-running team in that division. And, yes, they retake the lead there, but ultimately this is going to come down to another matchup between these two teams in a couple of weeks. So, you know, great game for Jordan Love. Not trying to gloss that over. But if I'm a Bears fan, if there's ever a loss you can be encouraged by, it is that loss yesterday, Sam.
And I'll tell you this, Jason, it felt like, and maybe this is just me having watched too much early season Bills football this year, it felt like Ben Johnson left stuff on the table and he was okay with that. And I think this is one of the few situations in the National Football League where you can be okay with that, right? You're seeing a team in week 14, right? You know you're going to see them again and it's going to matter more. Don't empty the bag, right? Let Green Bay empty the bag like they did on the weird reverse play, right? Let them go deep into whatever they need to do to pretend they need this win in the regular season at home, right? So they can have the 1 seed for an extra week or whatever the case may be. This seemed like, and obviously we'll know in a few weeks whether it's actually the reality of the situation or not, but it seemed like it was next level thinking from Ben Johnson. It seemed like they got to a point where obviously they could have tied that game, and Caleb did make a bad throw. I don't want that to go unnoticed. Sure. There was an opportunity he had to tie that game. But that said, it did feel like the Bears were not leaving more to be desired, but not reaching as far as they needed to into their bag. I still have a lot of confidence in the Chicago team moving forward. I'm with you.
I do too. Where are you on Caleb Williams? I'm curious, and I ask you because I remember what we talked about. The advantage of us having worked together as long as we have, which is crazy. It's been a couple of years already. I have the advantage of knowing where you stood on Caleb Williams because you said it, even when we were on the radio a couple of years ago with some company that's not even in business anymore. We had the advantage, the luxury. I have the advantage and luxury of kind of knowing where you stood on him and watching as he's evolved to see where your position on him has evolved to. So where are you right now on Caleb Williams?
Well, and you remember coming, because I was out on him, like
Yes.
you're saying, when the draft happened, I said, this is not a guy we should be using a number 1 overall pick on. But coming into this season, it seemed to me like it was more volatile with Caleb Williams. He was either going to be a guy that by the end of the season, we were going to be talking about him as Chicago might have to replace him, or by the end of the season, we're going to be talking about him as, okay, Chicago might actually have their franchise guy and he's actually a top, 12, 15 quarterback in the league. I'm leaning towards the latter. It does feel like there have been moments this season where Caleb Williams has taken the ball and he's been like, all right, I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to win 9 games and I'm going to prove it to you. And you're not going to have an opportunity to say anything about Caleb Williams not being able to win games in the NFL and being a winner. I think that there is something to be said about how he bounces back next week, right? Obviously, this is a big game, no matter what we talk about with them getting deep into their bag and not. It's still a big game in a big environment. And Caleb Williams, his entire career has kind of prided himself on bouncing back. Well, can he do that at the highest level is a question I'm excited to see him answer.
Yeah, don't fall asleep against the Browns next week if you're the Bears. Don't get caught.
Exactly.
No, but don't get caught looking ahead to that
Exactly.
game the following week against the Packers. Make sure you take care of business at Soldier Field next week if you are the Chicago Bears. The Buccaneers, maybe the most inexplicable loss of the weekend. At home against the Saints, who are dreadful. Sam, I'm at a loss for words. Tyler Shuck making plays and making the Bucs look bad, and I think casting a lot of doubt around this Buccaneers team.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd go as far as to say casting doubt around the Buccaneers team. I think that the Buccaneers in-house are going to chalk this one up to it's the NFL. You'll run into these every once in a while.
At home?
A divisional game that you lose, right? It happens, right? These things happen in the NFL. You can't win them all. That said,
Sam, is there a worse loss? Is there a worse loss in the league this year?
Oh, yeah, Buffalo losing to Miami.
Miami's going to be 7-7.
Los Angeles losing to Carolina. I think it's of that ilk, right? You just get to certain spots in the NFL. The Jets' first win. Who did the Jets' first win come against? Gosh, it's eluding me at this point. But they're just like, no one's going to win 0 games. Nobody's going to win 17, right? It's just how these. That said, Jason, I'll tell you, you alluded to it, man. Tyler Shuck had moments in this game. He had moments in this game where I was like, okay, I understand why they used a 2nd-round pick on him.
Yeah. I just, to me, it's more of an indictment on the Buccaneers. You got to take care of business and find ways. You got to beat the bad teams. I mean, we saw the Rams go on the road yesterday in Arizona, foot on throat, boots to asses. That's what I want to see from teams that I'm thinking of as potential Super Bowl teams, which is why we feel so strongly about the Rams. We will do so much more on the NFL tomorrow, I promise you. We haven't even gotten into the Daniel Jones, Jaden Daniels stuff, a little with Nick, but I want to get Sam's thoughts on a lot of that, which we will do tomorrow on the show. But we've got odds and ends around the corner, Sam Yarnell. A loss for words. We've got a Monday Night Football game to talk about. Hall of Fame stuff for baseball. One guy gets in out of the contemporary era ballot, and it's not the one I was hoping for. That's next. All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Monday. Where'd the time go? Believe we're 3 weeks away from the end of the year. It's goofy. As I said, tomorrow on the show, David Ardsma drops by, former big league reliever and closer, our baseball analyst. We'll get some thoughts with him on the baseball winter meetings underway in Orlando. Recap any big moves taking place there. Kyle Tucker visiting with the Blue Jays. Blue Jays just going all in now, man. Why not? Might as well. Anyway, lots to do with baseball tomorrow on the show with David Ardsma. We'll recap the Monday Night Football game, which we'll be talking about here in just a couple of minutes. Couple of quick reminders. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to subscribe to the Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast. It's available on all your favorite podcasting platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Odyssey, Amazon. Anywhere you get a podcast, you can listen to this show Monday through Friday, crystal clear audio, 45 minutes. It's great while you're driving to work, in the shower, on the treadmill, on a plane, on a train, no matter where you may be. Make sure to go and check that out. Also, the Sports Wrap with Jason Page YouTube channel. We've put a lot of work into this, and we hope you go check it out and subscribe to that YouTube channel. It's free. We've got great content there. The show is there Monday through Friday. 45 minutes, commercial free. Go and check it out. Also, Sports Wrap shorts are there. If there's a big story during the day, we're covering it. If there's a big game at night, we're covering it. And when it's on the weekends, we're doing both. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page YouTube channel is the place to go for Sports Wrap shorts, as is our TikTok channel, Sports Wrap Jason Page, and on Instagram, you got it, Sports Wrap Jason Page. And without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, on this Monday, time for odds and ends. Sam Yarnell, odds and ends, the baseball contemporary, the Hall of Fame contemporary era ballot. You've got writers, guys like Jason Stark, who I have a lot of respect for. You've got baseball executives, former players on this committee. And you had, I think it was 8 players up for potentially going into the Hall of Fame. And some, huge names. Look at the picture on the screen. You can figure it out. Guys like Bonds and Clemens and Sheffield on the ballot. They don't get in. Don Mattingly doesn't get in. Dale Murphy doesn't get in. Fernando Valenzuela doesn't get in. Carlos Delgado doesn't get in. But guess who gets in, Sam Yarnell? The all-time leader for home runs for a second baseman, Jeff Kent, will be inducted into Cooperstown, enshrined in Cooperstown next summer, Sam Yarnell. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, this is tough. It's really tough that Bonds, Clemens, Sheffield, and Valenzuela were each named on fewer than 5 of the 12 ballots.
Yep.
It's gotten ridiculous at this point. It has. It was ridiculous when I was a child, when Barry was first up for Hall of Fame induction, right? And it's even more ridiculous now, 20 some odd years later. It's tough to say that the history of baseball is in a good spot when you've got stuff like this going on every year, right? Every year we're talking about, not including the all-time home run king in the record books. It's upsetting. It's frustrating. It's, as a baseball purist and somebody who feels like they really love the game a ton, it's disheartening, honestly, at this point.
I agree. I wanted Don Mattingly to get in. Best player in baseball from 1984 to 1989. He does not get in. He doesn't even get close. And he was on this ballot in 2003, 2023. On it again this year. Doesn't get close to getting in. Dale Murphy, a great player, doesn't get in. Carlos Delgado doesn't get in. And yeah, look, I've always been of the opinion, put all the steroid guys in, put all the PED era guys in. We're smart enough to know what we saw with our own eyes. Odds and ends, Sam Yarnell. We got a Monday Night Football game tonight. Eagles and Chargers in Los Angeles. Those two teams getting together. Chargers plus 2.5 at home. Feels like a missed number to me. I like the Chargers getting 2.5. The total, 41.5, Sam Yarnell.
So as of the time that Jason and I are doing this, we don't know whether or not Justin Herbert will play.
Playing.
And that is why the number is where it is. And because of that, I would probably take the Eagles. But again, it feels like a massive stay away spot on the side just because quarterback injuries make everything a little funky with spreads. I like the under, though. I mean, it's a low total, 41.5, but these are just two offenses who haven't performed a ton well lately. I know Omarion Hampton's coming back for the Chargers. Yeah, that'll give him a little boost, but I just think the defense outplays the offense for both teams, and we go under 41.5 in this game. That's my best play for this one. I couldn't choose a side for you.
Yeah, I think it's hard to choose a side. I'm assuming Herbert will play. It's an important game. And you look at this AFC wildcard picture, which is becoming a lot more jumbled right now. And we didn't talk about it much in the context of the Chiefs. I keep saying it. Nobody wants to play Houston right now. And you saw why last night. That team is Man alive, that team is going to be dangerous if they get in. That's my dark horse. I don't know what the number is on them to win the Super Bowl. But
it's going down.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. What is it right now? Let me see if I can find it here before we say goodbye. It's 15-1. It's a lot lower than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
It's almost like I can't bet it anymore. We got to go. Thanks to Nick Ferguson. Thanks to you, Sam. We'll see you all back here on Tuesday. David Ardsma on the show then. Bye-bye.